if I'm showing you something once more that you've seen. This is a composite image of the world at night, and here we're looking specifically at Africa. And I like this because you see that Europe is comparatively well lit, and you see that Africa is in many ways a dark continent. It's not lit, and this is because we're impoverished as regards energy sources. Generally, lights show where people live. So often where you see dark spaces in the world where there's a lot more electricity, the dark spaces have to do with the desert. Very fewer people live in places like the desert, so to speak. So it's just showing the realities, the unfortunate realities that we face right now. And that reality is that we suffer from an immense energy deficit, notwithstanding our energy resources. So I haven't focused on the energy resources. They are immense. We are a very, very blessed continent. Nigeria is a very blessed country. Some other country, in fact, practically every African country is really blessed as regards energy resources. Even places that we thought didn't have any, like East Africa, they are now coming up with crude oil, and they have vast geothermal resources as well. So we need to understand that this has got to underpin strategic activity in African energy negotiations. You need to realize that it's something that we need, and we need it. We need it, and we need to encourage it. But however, I am not saying this so that we will be at a disadvantage from a negotiating perspective at all. But it's something that we really, really need to realize. This is another reality that comes in. African energy transactions often involve the government. The government owns the petroleum in the ground. I'm talking about petroleum now. It owns the mineral resources. So we're talking about petroleum, gold, for our purposes, crude oil, natural gas, bitumen, coal, all these, they're owned by the government. When you have a government involved in a negotiation or involved in a transaction, you are usually not just talking about economic matters. Even now, you are usually not talking about that because, for example, even if you're only dealing with the private sector, you're often going to be dealing with, excuse me, impact investors. And where you're dealing with some impact investors, you will find that a lot of their concerns will not just be about the money they're going to make, but about what difference they're going to make in this world, because many of them are talking about using their money to make the world a different place, or using their money to actually do something different. Excuse me. So there are other factors that are usually quite important and that come in. So it's usually important to understand some of these areas, to understand that there are certain things that have to be taken into consideration, and very often they are the most important. And here I will give an example. I've put in the example thing in my slide so as to remind myself to mention some of the example, to mention an example here and there without mentioning names. Some years ago, I was involved with some negotiations, Indian negotiations. I was brought in again because of my particular assistance that they were very, very interested in giving, and we were moving on and progressing very much. But we now found that tied to this, and tied to it as far as they were concerned, but not tied in the sense that it was part and parcel of these actual negotiations. Tied to it was the expectation that in return for all this, or for what it was they were prepared to do, what they had offered to do, and what we had accepted, the other party, which was also a government entity, not the NNPC, there was an expectation that it would be tied to getting some sort of crude oil concession. We were not in a position to give that concession. And so, even though all other factors were okay and whatever, because that was primarily the reason why they had started these discussions, the whole deal fell through. So you need to understand, in the case of the Indians, there was a government behind them. If you understand India, it's a country of what I think it's 1.5 billion people or something. And they need their energy and they're working with their energy very well. Their indicators improve, their development indicators improve, their energy access indicators improve all the time. So they're always looking for energy. They have some, but not enough for domestic consumption. So whatever they have, they use to ensure that they're able to maintain their domestic obligations. So very often when they go out, whatever they're doing or whatever they're offering is tied to ensuring that they're able to deal with their domestic obligations. And that is precisely the situation as well when you're talking with the Chinese. A similar thing that happened also, happened with Chinese negotiations as well. They were tied to certain things, and there was no certainty that they would necessarily get these things. I might come back to some of these examples a bit later. So there are certain underlying realities that you often have to look at when you are actually negotiating. But then I now have to say, what is negotiation? What are we talking about? And I've put a very simple definition there. A strategic discussion that resolves an issue in a way that both parties find acceptable. Investopedia, look it up online. But there are different definitions there. So again, if I'm using the chat group, we say, what is negotiation? We're negotiating all the time, all the time. If you are alive and you are interacting with people, you are negotiating a lot of the time. In our stratified society, which is again a bit dictatorial as well, it's not often recognized because very often the person with seniority, the person who is higher up, will come and dictate and state what A should be or what B should be. But you'll find that, in fact, in life, you're always negotiating. So what would you say is negotiation, and what would you say is not negotiation? So if, again, I can open up my chat function, what do you see? What is negotiation? What is not negotiation? What is an activity or something that you would do that is not going to be regarded as negotiation? And what really is the purpose of negotiation? We need to realize that negotiation is talking, finding an acceptable compromise, so to speak, an acceptable way to move forward in whatever transaction it is that you want when we're talking from a business perspective. But in fact, if you're outside business, it can often just be you and your friend talking and deciding where do you want to go, which restaurant are you going to go to today, just to hang out and relax. And one person wants Indian food, one person wants Chinese food, and you speak and you reach a compromise and say, well, since neither wants the other one, maybe we can go to a bistro where we will have European continental food. You've struck a compromise. You've struck a compromise. You've actually negotiated. You have reached an agreement, and you go to your restaurant. So if you look around, every day we're always negotiating, always negotiating. But what is not negotiation? And I think that is something that we really need to think about and realize. What is the purpose of negotiation? To agree. What are you trying to do when you're negotiating? You're trying to get an acceptable, you're finding an acceptable solution. Ideally, you'd like it to be everything that you particularly want. But realistically, you often have to realize that it may not be so. You might not be able to do that. You need to accommodate the other person. If you and the other person have the same objectives and you totally align and you totally agree, that is fine. That is great, but that doesn't always happen. So we need to understand negotiation is a life skill. In fact, right now it's so important, and I think in Nigeria it's so important because some of the problems that we're facing as a nation now are going to be problems that will have to be negotiated, in the sense of people sitting down and discussing and deciding what do we want to do, where do we want to go, what exactly is our move forward. So you see, negotiation is a people skill. I will have to correct my typographicals. Negotiation is a people skill. It involves people, it involves negotiating, talking with people. It's a people skill with knowledge and expertise as the foundation. It is girded on that. So no matter how charming you are, no matter how much your charisma is, you actually will be a thorough empty vessel if you don't have knowledge and you don't have expertise. These are things that we need to realize very much. So, what is not negotiation, that is still um, something we need to think about. So, what are the phases of negotiation? The first phase I see is getting your information, getting as much knowledge as possible. Now, unfortunately, we Nigerians are famous. I mean, there are all sorts of stories about Nigerian negotiators or people going out to conclude deals and spending a lot of time shopping and going to buy the latest bags, shoes, or if they're men, suits and without actually preparing and possibly not doing as much preparation right in the beginning. But in actual fact, um, this is not supposed to be the case. Negotiations are undergirded by knowledge and information. You need to know as much as possible about everything to do with the subject matter and the other party in as much detail as possible. You need to understand that nothing is unimportant and trivial. So if it's a country you're not familiar with, that the other party is from, you need to understand the country, you need to understand the culture. There are many things that you can do that come out rude in another person's culture. So you need to make sure that you don't do those certain things, because at the end of the day, I've said that it's a people skill. So you need to make sure that you are not grating on each other. Negotiation is not about grating on each other. It's not about getting on each other's nerves. What is it not about again? It's not about being rude. It's not about shouting down the other persons. Those are not negotiations. I have seen that when people come in and people are in fact rude to each other or speak and dismiss the other party's viewpoint and say, well, this is just what it has to be. It's not that. It's a people skill. And the truth is, if you're negotiating with another party and the negotiators don't like you, you've really damaged your position. I talk a lot about likability. Likability is a very important thing in life, and it's important for a person to like you and to want to mix with you. These things happen when uh, you know a lot. First of all, when you know a lot about somebody, it's a sign of politeness. It means that you have gone out of your way to research that country, research the culture, research the company, understand the negotiators. It is a big sign of respect. Now, I mentioned those things, but obviously the subject matter you are talking about is very, very important. Know it and understand it. Know it and understand it within your realm of expertise. You know, read up again, brush up again, understand the contracts, understand what is the latest as well. Make sure that you're not obsolete. I remember at a point some years ago, I actually paid to attend a course on something that I'm an expert on. And I paid to attend just to reassure myself that I was still current, and that I hadn't gone obsolete. Thankfully, that was not the case. So, did I get new knowledge from the place? Not really, but it was great for contacts, etc. And it was great for reassurance that I was still current. That happened, with many times knowledge is changing and you don't know it, and you're still in your static spot without knowing that life has moved on. You have to really make sure that that doesn't happen. So knowledge and information about the subject matter, the parties, the country, the culture, as much as you can. There's nothing like you are reading too much or you are knowing too much in this area. It's not possible for that to happen. Secondly, the team. It's not the time for learners. If there's a real learner, that person can come and stand by the side of the person who knows, with strong instructions to keep absolutely quiet and to just look and listen and maybe take notes. But essential skill sets are important. So you need to make sure that you have the right negotiating team. There's some negotiations where you can go solo, but I don't think they exist really in the energy sector, talking very frankly, because there are certain skill sets that are necessary. And even where you see negotiators going somewhere solo, have learnt a lot. They have gone and looked up different things. But there's a lot of money involved in energy transactions. And so it's just good to get the right people. So those setting up the teams need to have humility. The jack of all trades is not what is needed here, because the jack of all trades is exactly that, a jack of all trades. You don't need that. You need the masters of the trades. So stay in your subject of mastery and bring in um, those who are masters in other areas. And you find there's some essential um, essential specializations. I started off with management, yeah, because you find that a lot of things stand or fall. They have been poorly managed. But then you need the engineers. The engineers are core. The energy economists are really, really core, yeah. Project management, the financiers are there. The lawyers and accountants are good for energy transactions, because you're dealing about technical matters that are not taught in the universities of accounting and law. Energy law teaches you a lot, but it doesn't teach you the engineering, and it doesn't teach you the economics of energy. And these are vital. The peculiarities of each situation will dictate team composition. So it's good to be flexible. It's also good to have a wide network of specialists that you deal with or interact with. It's really, really good that in a lot of the law firms, there's compartmentalization and departmentalization. So you find people who are really, really specialized in different aspects of different transactions, being able to be part of this entire process. So the
I'm a
team
member
is
of this.
very, very essential.
I thought I would be a member of this.
Then you have to
Ready.
have a negotiation plan. You don't just jump and prepare. Hello, I was muted by you. Anyway, yeah, so this is all preparation beforehand. So you need to have negotiation plan. So you don't just enter and start swimming aimlessly. Have a plan that's there beforehand. That platform,
We sincerely apologize. It's like Professor is having issues with her network. She will join us shortly.
Hello. Hello.
Okay, hello, ma. Welcome
Hello.
back, ma. Welcome back. We can hear you.
Rakiba?
We can hear you, ma.
Yeah, I'm back. I don't know what happened. My screen again. Can you see my
Yes, we can see your screen, ma.
screen?
It seems your network is fluctuating. Ma, your network is fluctuating. It's not very strong. We can barely hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, ma. While we are waiting for the Prof to come on, we would like to bring you a message from one of our sponsors.
Hello.
Prof, you're welcome.
Yeah, sorry, it's my IPNX. Yeah, thank you. It's my IPNX. I'm going to mention them completely. You have disabled my screen sharing.
Okay, we've made you a host now, the co-host.
Okay, so can I? No, I can't share. Okay. Okay, please, can you see it?
Yes,
My
now we
screen.
can now.
Okay, apologies, please. I hope it will continue now. Yeah, so I had talked about the negotiation plan, that it's absolutely essential to have um, to have a plan there with the correct documents. You also need to understand what your areas of flexibility are. What is your bandwidth? How far can you go on either side? What can you absolutely not take? What are your deal breakers there? And what is your best alternative to a negotiated um, agreement? So, in other words, what are your options? What are your options if you don't get the agreement? You need to have all these things worked out, because what it means is that you go in and you are prepared. So when you've done this, you've got your team assembled, you all are knowledgeable in your different areas, you have a negotiation plan. Obviously, your team will have met, so it'll be a real team. You have a plan, you're actually really ready to go in for the negotiation. In so many instances, if you're dealing with energy contracts, you're dealing with persons from other countries, you're dealing with different jurisdictions as well. So, what's your partner? What are the deal breakers? You need to understand all this as well. Um, this is just being very, very realistic. What if something doesn't happen? What if you can't move forward? Sometimes the what if is you go back to what you were doing before if it was totally acceptable. In some instances, it is, well, let me look for an alternative that I might have gone to if there wasn't this particular partner. So you need to evaluate your alternatives. Then you select the alternative that you think will give you the highest expected value, that will give you something as close to what you wanted when you started talking to these partners, or at least not too far, so to so you know so to speak. So once you know all this one, understand where your it means you might have to go to the other alternative, but you need to understand that. Now you need to understand what the deal breakers are. This is incredibly important. Like I said, sometimes the deal breakers are not inside that room, they are outside the room, they are outside the agreement. So you need to understand that a particular thing has come in, a particular agreement is in existence because of XYZ that are extraneous to the circumstance. So all this is part of your planning period. You need to really understand that. Now, the next one is you really go and negotiate. You do need to think about the room you're negotiating in, if it is within your own control, if you are not the one who has traveled or gone to the other person's territory to discuss. As much as possible, comfortable room is also a sign of courtesy. Have your tea, coffee, and whatever by the corner, because you find again that when there's an impasse or when there is some sort of slight friction or you're not able to agree, it's very, very convenient to just get up and go and get a cup of coffee or whatever, or have a 5 minute break or whatever there. So room should be conducive, right temperature. Well, for me, I like very, very light places, very, very light places, but at least a very comfortable place. Now, you need to negotiate with civility. I say this because, again, I have seen quite a lot of rudeness exhibited with people thinking that negotiation has a lot to do with shouting down the other party, or so understand that a good venue, which I've talked about, a conducive atmosphere, and likability. I've mentioned likability as well. It's very important. Psychological factors are very, very important. I have seen things concluded just because the people like each other. The person with the favor to give takes a liking to the person that is requesting the favor, and that person says, yes, you can have it. Based on that, not really based on anything else. I have seen deals that are cut just based on that. A person wants to be able to interact with you, still continue to interact with you, or believes that he or she would like to help you move on in this area, or wants to be a partner with you. That comes in. Psychology plays a huge, huge role. And if you look at world events as well, you will see it playing out. You will see major, major world events are being played out now because of certain world leaders to each other, or whatever. And I won't go into that, but that is definitely playing out now. For example, between the US, United States, and Russia, you can see that playing out clearly with the past president and this president and the same person who has been president in Russia throughout this period. It played out as in so many areas in the world arena. It has played out, and it continues to play out. No, no less so in negotiated settlements. Then you have patience and good listening. Very, very essential. Patience is essential. If you are not a patient person at home, well, this is not your house. When you're negotiating, you have to learn that patience. You also have to learn listening. And most people are not good listeners. It's something that has to be learned. Listening is not when you are simply waiting for the other party to finish talking before you respond. Listening is hearing the person, understanding the person, and understanding where that person is. Even if you do not agree with that person, understand the person and how he or she has arrived at that position. Then you can talk better. And where you do not understand, ask questions that show you do not understand. I find that I have to say, I'm asking to clarify. I'm not asking, to argue or whatever, but to clarify. I'm asking to understand you better. And you find that when you do tell people that, they cool down and they talk to you better. So it's all about interaction. The negotiation is about understanding yourselves and interacting with each other in a nice and respectful fashion, even as you are making your point known, and the other person is coming up with his or her point. So you're ready to negotiate. You've done all these different things. Now you go ahead. Now you negotiate, and obviously at the end you reach agreement and you close the deal. And at this point is the most critical time for the service specializations. And the service specializations are the ones that tie up, write up the books, do everything there. And that is where we come in. The lawyers are service specializations in this area. They're the ones whose job it is to ensure that the documents accurately reflect all the different legal obligations of the parties in a clear and concise manner. It's very, very critical, and this is where your expertise is necessary. To a great extent, the lawyer is in the room to ensure that the boundaries are being maintained, and also to understand totally what is happening, so that at the end of the day, the documents will be right. So contracts, well drafted, regulate and set the tone for the entire relationship. So you are really managing the relationship when you're drafting and coming out with the complete contract. At the end of the day, it should be an honest contract. It is not the time for sharp practices and trying to slip in things that show you're too clever, that can kill the contract. That happens sometimes. Again, I have to give you an example of a certain contract, I will say nothing about any of the parties, but a certain negotiation was done and certain things were agreed which failed to be captured in the contract that was to represent the relationship and the agreements that were reached. And as a consequence of this, one party was able to claim all sorts of advantages that are antithetical and do not occur in that type of contract at all normally. Not at all. It was able to claim certain expenses that just should never, never have been done. So there is a temptation sometimes to relax and breathe a sigh of relief and say, oh, well, this negotiation is over, I finished, thank God for that. And then not be careful at this time when you're tying up all the loose ends. You have to really tie up the loose ends in is actually what will help ensure that you have the right agreement and that the parties are able to keep to it. Because when you're dealing with energy contracts, you're not dealing with short-term contracts, you're dealing with long-term ones. And things happen, life happens to people. People don't stay in one spot forever. So you're reasonably certain that the MD at the beginning of a transaction
One moment, I think Prof has stopped, is also still having a problem with her network issues. She'll join us shortly. welcome, Prof.
Hello, sorry, so sorry again. Okay, can I go back?
Yes, ma, you can.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
You can? Okay.
Yes, ma.
This particular slide, and I gave the example of a certain contract. I hope people heard me about a contract that was poorly drafted that caused a lot of problems. Okay, and then this phase now is another phase. It's an essential phase. People often forget this, and this is evaluation. And I think for us that are specialists and are people who help other people with their transactions, it's very, very important to evaluate the process realistically, learn from mistakes, learn from successes, and write down, document um, findings for the future. This is a very, very important stage for all. It's very important. So these are what I see as the essential stages for any sort of negotiations with any type of complexity. It's important, and I think if you do this and you continue, you hone your skills, you get better and better at what it is that you are doing. So this was the aspect of the presentation that I thought about, because when you are talking about ensuring long-term success, many factors give success. I don't know whether you can be talking about learned skills, because I believe, for example, if you have been fortunate enough to go through negotiation where you have learned to respect and value the other, understand their point of view, and where you have agreements that those that are done outside. If you've really done all the different things well, I don't think that you will have much of a problem, because at this point you're really talking about management. So if you do have a project management specialist that is there, that person can help. Don't assume that, oh well, we know it. We know it. You actually don't. That is why certain specializations exist, and that is why people go to school to learn certain things. So I am very much of the viewpoint that the continued success lies of any relationship lies in well executed agreements that reflect the agreed intents of the parties and that are in accordance with laws of contract and the host states of the parties. This last one I'll just talk about for 2 minutes, because people forget that you can come out and say, okay, this thing is in law, this contract is shall be in accordance with the laws of New York, for example, which is a very popular place because it's good for international investments and transactions. The place of arbitration shall be London. You can put all that there. But you better make sure that your contract does not violate the rules of Ecuador or the rules of Nigeria or Equatorial Guinea or whatever. If a critical party is from there, if it is a host state. So don't violate the host states of the parties. Otherwise, there will be some of the things that will come in and make a difference to whatever your contractual relationship is. You need to understand. And of course, there has been a supposition throughout that you are actually quite aware and conversant with the way that international law is going and with the different trends in the world. And that's why one of my first slides talked about understanding what net zero is, and understanding the trend and the move away from hydrocarbons that is still sort of occurring. Let nobody be blinded to the rising prices now, and the Ukraine war, and the fact that no gas from Russia is causing certain things. If you talk to any rich climate activist, you will see that there is still, even apart from the rich ones, the really committed ones, you will see that there is still a lot of activity in those areas. And in any event, there are some places you can never get to if you do not have a good energy mix and you do not use your renewable energy. So you need to understand that. From our perspective, though, we need to know that good contracts can completely destroy the parties' relationships. One of my last words will be that the lawyers need to always make this plain. I think it's changing a little bit, but in the earlier days, definitely a few decades ago, it was very, very common for engineers to assume that they were fantastic draftsmen of legal contracts, and there were a lot of uh, that they fell into because they didn't realize that you go to school for a purpose. And the truth is that when law is very good, is very clear and easily understood, if you put in too much jargon, it means you're a bad draftsman. Often people from other disciplines do not quite understand that fact. So we need to sometimes, not sometimes, most of the time, stand our grounds and make sure that infringed in. Those things give us the and from making sure that contracts actually reflect what they say. Managing critical events. I'm a big believer in contracts. I've talked a lot about relationships and all that. Things come in and they're very, very important because you manage events easily when the people like you and you can actually talk and you have a good, it's good to have certain things inside the contract. So
We sincerely apologize. It's like Prof is having serious issues with our network. While we wait, let's play this video from one of our partners. Thank you. Okay, she's back now. Prof is back. Welcome back, ma'am. Welcome
yeah,
back.
it's back. And so that's it. So you need to understand certain clauses that will come in. So renegotiation clauses that come on into force when certain agreed events occur. These are good, really good. Contracts that clauses that allow you to reopen certain clauses within the contract. They are often very, very important. They stop you from having to use the ultimate clauses, which are the dispute settlement clauses, the arbitration clauses, which we do not want at all, so to speak. I think that mediation clauses should come into an extent, but they are used to a limited extent so far. So some of all these clauses come in once it is necessary. So that really is how you manage these. But like I said, these relationships. But like I said, it's a question of relationships, integrity, trust, and understanding at the end of the day. And I believe Oh dear. And that is the end of my slide presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof, for that wonderful presentation. Just to give a brief recap of what Prof took us through, she started her presentation by introducing energy transactions to us and giving us the various sources of energy, such as solar, wind, crude oil, etc. She later took us through the realities of energy in Africa, where she mentioned the immense energy deficit suffered by the African community. She also mentioned that African energy transactions often involve the government, and she gave examples of the Indian and Chinese negotiation. Then she went ahead to give definitions of negotiation, where she said negotiation is a people's skill with knowledge and expertise as its foundation. Said that people have to like you when you are negotiating, and that you need to do your research on the country, culture, and subject matter. Prof later took us through the different negotiation phases, such as information. She said when you want to start a negotiation, you have to have a sufficient knowledge of the subject matter you want to negotiate, the culture, and the country where the negotiation is going to be carried out. She also told us that another phases of negotiation she put us through is that you have to have your team, that you need to engage specialists in that particular field and work as a team, and try as not to be a loner when going for negotiating a contract. She also told us that we also have to have a negotiation plan, where she said your plan has to achieve, you have to have a plan of what you want to achieve during that negotiation, and have an alternative plan in case you don't meet the already set out plan. She also now took us to the negotiation itself, that after your plan, then you now go on to the real negotiation. Then she now said after the real negotiation process, you have to close your deal. That is, you end the agreement and make sure you agree at a consensus. Then she mentioned the last point, which I noted, and said after all this negotiation process, you have to evaluate and learn. Ensure that you go through the steps of your negotiation, what went wrong, and learn from your mistakes. But Prof, I just want to ask, before I open the floor to the general audience to ask their questions, and mind you, in case you want to ask your question, you can let us know, send a chat to us. Either you send it in the chat box or send a message to us so that we can unmute you and on your video for you so that you can ask Prof these questions. But before I take questions from the audience, Prof, I want to ask, can you kindly put us through the negotiation process of peer-to-peer electricity trading in the African energy market? Do you get my question?
I am not going to be able to put you through specifics. I'm not going to be able to put you through specifics as regards that at all.
But can you give us a general broad view?
At this point, no, I can't give you a general.
Okay. What about how do we reach a consensus in a when we are negotiating a contract to be able to reach a balanced and bankable power purchase agreement in the African energy space?
What do you mean now in that sense?
Okay.
How do you reach a balance?
In case, what about in a situation
where it has too much scope?
Okay, for example, if we want to negotiate a power purchase agreement in the African energy space, what are the things we should look out for that can make it bankable and balanced for all parties involved? Hello? Hello, Prof.
Well, I hope I can answer. You are dealing with a price structure that is regulated, first of all. So there is a bandwidth within which you are working and within which you are operating. So that question of bankability, again, has to do with what your financing is and what is actually acceptable. So these are areas that I have worked in, but I do not know that there is a one size fits all answer. I think that is the problem I'm having with like your two questions.
Okay,
But you have
it's more
also
like broad.
Pardon?
I said my
It's more
questions
like
are
what?
broad. They are broad.
Yes,
I'm not being
yes. I
specific.
think that yes, if you are not talking about a specific instance, then you
Okay.
have issues. But with the power purchase agreements, you don't have that big leeway. You don't have that big leeway of say, oh, the price can be X or the price can be 10X. You are actually dealing with very narrow sort of parameters. We do not have a privatized system in Nigeria in the real sense of in the real sense of the word, and that is why you don't find those big varieties that you would find in a place that had greater flexibility. So I don't know if that answers you. If that answers you, I can deal with specifics. I can't deal with a specific answer to a generalized question.
Okay, no problem, Prof.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us tips on, can you give us some tips that can help us in negotiating contracts with the international community, most especially China?
I think I have given you the tips because the truth is that, let me take the Chinese. You have to understand the Chinese people. My experience with the Chinese in negotiations as well, where I've been involved and where they have actually come to the office and have spoken to me, is that what I'm talking about, understanding the country, understanding the people, understanding the culture, and understanding what is incredibly important to them that is outside the contract is very, very important. Very, very important. You need to also understand that they come from a very strict culture. And in China, people are being executed for corruption, which means that there are certain things they dare not do. But you also need to understand that that is the law in their country, not in yours. So they won't have the same qualms about totally corrupting you and giving you all those different things. But there are many things that they themselves cannot do. So they are strictly bound from the top down. There are certain conversations you may not even be able to have with them if they are restricted. So my first bit about knowledge is what is very, very important with the Chinese, understanding them, and then not for they can also they're basically very polite, but they can also be incredibly rude. So you are also not supposed to fall into that problem of being rude, matching them at rudeness, but understanding them and understanding their culture and understanding how they operate is totally, totally important. Understanding that there is Hong Kong and they have those issues with Hong Kong. At the same time, there is Macau, which is where all the rich Chinese go and gamble, and it's still allowed to exist. Understand, it's a totally different place, totally different terrain. Understand where they're going, what they're doing. Because if you don't, there are many, many agreements that you will enter into with the Chinese and you will not be able to get out of them. They also are not careless about tying up their loose ends after agreements, but often we are. China is actually involved in the certain upstream contract that I referred to. It was with the Chinese, and there was a laxity on the part of the other party, and it led to a really horrendous situation. So I don't know.
Thank you,
what
Prof. Thank you,
sorry,
Prof. You've been very helpful. Like the thing I can get and understand from the tips is ensure you understand their culture, research about them, know who they are, their language, their culture, what they like, what they want. It will guide us in negotiating agreements with them, whether they are local or international. So there is no particular or peculiar tips we have to go for. And also we should make ourselves likable during to our co-negotiators to make the transaction easier for us. That's my take home from this.
Maybe I'll explain this thing I call likability, because it's not like I prefer to call it likability. I don't know what it is. Let a person want to continue talking with you. That's what it is. Let a person want to continue interacting with you. That's what it is at the lowest step. But the Chinese thing is important. You need to understand as well that the people who are master negotiators, like the Americans, when the Japanese were right on top, they were sending their children, sending people to Japan to learn Japanese and to understand the culture. They're doing the same thing with China as well, understanding the culture so that they will understand the people. But you're actually dealing with people who are master negotiators, the Chinese people, who come from very strict cultures, very strict. They will be killed in no time at all if they do certain things. So they know, it's a different ball game. Let me say, they are not a lax lot at all. Yes.
Okay, Miss Diana Abasi Opo, she's asking that there are some small energy transactions where other technical parties, including engineers, finance, etc., are not involved. The client expects the lawyers to provide the entire advice to protect the transaction. So she's asking, how does one work around this, seeing as lawyers cannot provide more than legal advice? Hello, Prof.
Entire. She's saying they expect the lawyers to provide the entire.
She said there are some transactions that she said there are some transactions that does not include engineers and the finance team, and that the client expect the lawyers to provide all the entire advice to protect that particular transaction. She's now asking that how can the lawyer provide this, make this possible, since they can only provide legal advice in this contract or these negotiations?
Hello. A person who asks you advice for advice is asking you for advice within your area of specialization. Where a person comes to you that way, I'm hazarding a guess that you are probably dealing with smaller entities that that may or may not have such people. But what I would say is that for you, you need to have some people that you can ask. You can go to and ask, or you can go to get some sort of clarification where it is needed.
It's like we've lost Prof again. Our network is really fluctuating.
But I mean, if it's a pure finance, but yeah, go on.
Okay, you were, we couldn't hear you. So I was just trying to let them know that it's like your network has gone again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, like I say, IPNX is just terrible now with this, but yeah. So I said that in such a case, I'm hazarding a guess that you're dealing with smaller companies then.
Yeah, she said small energy transactions.
Yeah, so the small ones, you are the lawyer that will have to look and vet and make sure that you're aligning with modern best practice. In those instances, make sure you have got your books ready. You are up to date with your books, up to date with your knowledge, so that from a legal perspective, your clauses are totally up to date. And where you are not sure, please have friends in engineering or in energy economics. Please have friends there that you can throw questions at if necessary. But there's a lot that you have. In the legal realm, because law rests on other disciplines, you'll find that a lot of us that have worked in these areas have a working knowledge in some of these areas. So that's what you have to. That's what you have to do. I recognize that for the smaller transactions, you can't deal with all these different people.
I don't see any other questions here at the chat box. Do we have any more questions for Prof? We don't have any question here. So Prof, just one last question before we go. I want to ask that what are the things that can help us better on how to negotiate project financing in African energy industry, especially on crucial financial issues? That is, what are the things we should look out for? Hello? Hello, Prof, can you hear me? Hello, Prof.
And all the, I believe that there are special areas there, like finance, for example. I think it's, yeah. So I said there have to be those ones. So like, I think that there have to be clauses that, for example, concentrate totally on the on-grid electricity transactions for Nigeria in particular. We need to do some specific courses, because it's when you bring out the specific causes that you can actually deal with the different type of clauses that you can particularly talk about. So I have intentionally done an overview, even though I have written in this area and talked about different things. But it's very important to realize that for those courses where you can delve in detail, that it's important to have those clauses so you can delve in detail into the different clauses that will be very, very essential for lawyers that will be involved in these transactions, especially the lawyers in the smaller firms and that are dealing with smaller transactions.
Okay, without any question from the audience, I think we have come to the end of today's session. And I would like to start my closing remarks by thanking Professor Omorogbe for sparing us our time to teach us how to negotiate process in energy transaction, most especially in the African continent. Thank you, Prof. We are really honored for sparing your time for us. Thank you, ma.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, everybody. Bye-bye.
Secondly, I want to use this opportunity to once again thank our partners, Centurion Law Group and Brumshi Consultancy, for making this program possible and at no cost to we, the participants. Lastly, without our dear participants, there won't be any training. So I would like to appreciate you all for taking time out to learn one or two things about the industry. We trust you would have learned something and that it will help better your individual practices. Kindly note that the training continues tomorrow at the same time, where another of our international scholars will train us on a very insightful topic on energy transactions in African energy space. For those of you that could not send your question, you can reach us after this program through our email at lawyersinenergy@gmail.com or info@lawyersenergy.com. I'll type it in the message box so you can pick it up from there. My name is Rakiba Olok and I'm the Executive Secretary of the Lawyers in Energy Network. You can join the network by being a member if you go to our website on www.lawyersinenergynetwork.com and click on the subscription page. See you tomorrow and bye for now. Thank you.